All right. So how to think like a Hall of Famer. In the late 1980s Cincinnati Red, Pete Rose was chasing Ty Cobb's record for the most number of hits in a career. Rose was a lifetime 300 hitter over the course of his 20-year career. When he got down to the point where he needed 14 more hits to break Cobb's record, he was asked by a sports writer, "Hey, Pete, how many more times at bat do you think you'll need to break Cobb's record?" Without missing a beat, Pete Rose replied, 14. Even though he was a lifetime 300 hitter, Rose expected to get a hit every single time he went to the plate. So basically, he just never expected to fail. He acted as if it were impossible. This ties directly in with a saying that's quite popular today that you may have heard: "Fake it till you make it," or any saying along those lines. It comes down to the law of attraction, and what we start to focus on and what we put our efforts into is what becomes true. That's both in the performance of ourselves and in our life. The other one I'm going to pull up for you guys comes from Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And we were discussing some things the other day with a couple of our crew, and it was just a really good lesson. So I shared it with everyone. Every man is entitled to be valued for his best moments. When we treat men as he is, we make him worse than he is. When we treat him as if he were already what he potentially could be, we make him that. We make him what he should be. All right, so we are more than our greatest mistake. Drive on. Act like it's impossible to fail and drive on. All right, we'll get right into it. What is plyometric training? It refers to activities that enable a muscle to reach maximal force in the shortest amount of time possible. So if we break this definition down, there's a couple of very important components. It is maximal force, shortest time. Typically, force and velocity can't exist in the same vector. So it's not max force and it's not absolute velocity. It's maximal force in shortest possible time. Simply put, plyometric exercises produces explosive power that allow you to generate high magnitudes of force at a very fast rate. So high magnitudes of force, very fast rate. If we think about the component of power in plyometric training, what exercises start to come to mind? Use the chat function. What exercises come to mind when we're thinking of power and high magnitudes of force at a fast rate or high velocity? Say them or type them. Box jumps, boom, great one. Box jumps, broad jumps, vertical testing, all Olympic lifts, etc. So those are all forms of plyometric training, and they use the stretch shortening cycle, which we're going to get into in a little bit. The scientific definition of power is force times distance divided by time, or work divided by time. So force times distance divided by time. Power has a time derivative always. Think about a maximum effort jump. You can't jump as high as you can slowly, and you can't throw a baseball as far as you can slowly. Does that make sense? All right. Examples of activities, we already went over that. Almost all sports require power. There's a term going around the sport performance community now that speed kills. It is one of the most important variables of athletic endeavors. What's the difference between plyometric ballistic stretch like high knees? Plyometric jumps. Between plyometric jump to a ballistic stretch like high knee. Let's try rephrasing that question because I don't quite understand what you're asking. All right. So examples of acts of daily living that require high magnitudes of force at a high rate of speed, there's not many out there. So ADL is obviously acts of daily living. That is why a lot of us kind of lose that ability as we go along in our lives. The further we remove ourselves from athletic endeavors, the less likely we are to be successful at athletic endeavors. That is why there are so many injuries in pickup football games and softball games and dodgeball, Thanksgiving Day. It's all, to put humor to it, it's all washed up old former athletes go out there and try to relive their glory days on Thanksgiving when their guts full of beer and turkey, and they get hurt. They tear ACLs, they strain hamstrings, et cetera, et cetera. The reason is not so much that people shouldn't do plyometric training or power training in their older age. It's just that they have stopped doing it for so long that when they return back to it, it creates a lot of strain that they're not used to. So we got to remember the principle of accumulation for, as we do things, we get a little bit better at them, and we must maintain that accumulation throughout in order to continuously progress. And that's the principle of progressive overload. So not many acts of daily living require power, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't be trained. It just means they shouldn't be performed without proper training. Benefits and risks. The benefits of plyometric training is best method to increase muscle power, improve speed, and overall athletic performance. The exercise mimics many sport-specific movement patterns, such as jumping. Risks. All plyometric training is inherently dangerous. For youth training, overly straining plyometric exercise can cause damage to the growth plates. Older populations can cause bone issues, strained hamstrings and ligaments. The movements are occurring fast, making correction cues hard. The body's in free flight, increasing the chance of mechanical injury. It can override muscles' protective mechanisms or inhibitories, such as the GTO and the muscle spindle. GTO is Golgi tendon organ. Golgi tendon organ.
What's his last name? I can't get into his account. What's his last name? First name?
All right, moving on.
Okay, so he never got billed. His credit card never went through, so we waited.
So there's two different models in plyometric training and physiology. The plyometric mechanics and physiology. There's the mechanical model and the neurophysiological model. So remember, neurological or neuro means the mind, the brain, or the neurological system, the electrical system, while the mechanical model is the physical model, the actual component itself. So the mechanical model is elastic energy stored from the rapid stretch of the muscles and tendons, then released, increasing overall force production. This is referred to as the series elastic component. So the mechanical model is the series elastic component, and is the natural physical elastic energy stored in the stretch. So think about a rubber band, stretching a rubber band and then releasing it, letting it fly. That's using the rapid stretch and then the return of resting length using that kinetic energy or potential energy, excuse me. The neurophysiological model is the stretch reflex. The muscle tissue is an involuntary reaction that causes a rapid contraction, shortening of the muscle that is being stretched. This is done by the muscle spindle located in the muscle belly and acts as a protective mechanism to avoid overstretching the muscle. Basically what this is saying, so the neurophysiological model is those inhibitors that we were just talking about. This is actual inhibition, but when we use it to our benefit, where it's no longer inhibition, we're in a sense kind of tricking our natural protective mechanisms. So if we were to rapidly stretch a muscle, the GTO and muscle spindle sense that stretch and they recruit the muscle to contract to protect it from being overstretched. This can be seen or pictured as if someone were to drop a object to you from a higher vantage point and you expected it to be light, but it was heavier than you thought, you would have that eccentric load, and then all of a sudden you would contract against that and control for it, if that makes sense.
Oh gosh, I'm so busy here. My phones are like legit like going crazy.
The stretch shortening cycle is the combination of both of these. It's the stretch shortening cycle and the series elastic component. It's the reflex to generate maximal muscle recruitment in a minimal amount of time, producing high magnitudes of force. So we're going to break that definition down. The stretch shortening cycle uses the series elastic component, the mechanical model, and the stretch reflex, the neurophysiological model, to generate maximal muscle recruitment in minimal amount of time, producing high magnitudes of force. So we're recruiting both the SEC and the stretch reflex, or the mechanical model and the neurophysiological model. The SSC involves three phases: the eccentric phase, the amortization phase, and the concentric phase. The eccentric phase is the stretching. So if we were to view a box jump, and I'll pull one up a little bit later on YouTube, if we were to look at a box jump, you'll commonly see the person who is about to perform the box jump stretch up nice and tall and then rapidly squat down. As they're squatting down, that's the eccentric phase. Then there's going to be a brief pause where they transition from the descent to the ascent, or the eccentric to the concentric. That pause is the amortization. That's the time between the eccentric and concentric phases, and it allows the CNS to send signals. Then the concentric phase is the voluntary contraction of out of the squat position into the jump in the box jump. But on other exercises, obviously, it's not the stretch and the standing. The release of the stored elastic energy and rapid muscle contraction from the stretch reflex. So the eccentric phase, we're creating energy from the stretch. Then the amortization phase. Then the concentric phase releases the stored elastic energy and is the voluntary contraction of the muscles. Here are some examples of lower body plyometric exercises and a progression. So we have jumping in place, vertical jumps, bounds, and depth jumps. The NSCA does have a certain strength recommendation before beginning plyometric training. This has been recently argued in the performance community on whether there is a strength requirement in order to perform it or not. And the argument often made is if we look at kids who perform plyometric exercises just in play, they are most likely not able to squat 1.5 times your body weight before starting. The counterpoint to that is that they're not necessarily in a structured, progressively overloaded plyometric program. They're free play. So I think there's a little bit of argument on either side. I would like to hear from you guys what you think. I know you're mostly probably pretty new to this, but this is a conversational opportunity, and I'd like to hear from you guys while I load up a box jump on YouTube. So let's hear it. Someone turn your mic on, and let's discuss whether you think there should or should not be a strength requirement before beginning plyometric training.
So in the office, the office that I'm at is a PT and sports ortho kind of thing.
Okay.
So I deal with like the transitioning from bringing patients back from injuries and then all the way through strength and actually up to plyometric for some of the football and sports related stuff we get.
Cool.
I do feel like there should be a little bit of a strength requirement because I feel like there should be a little bit of muscles and the joints being able to take the force, be able to absorb it. So if you're not able to squat at least your body weight, then you have no business in doing a depth jump. But that's not to say you can't do vertical jumps, because that'd be great. So I think it all depends on where your level is and how you feel comfortable and trusting your skills. I don't know. That's just kind of what I see.
No, Nicholas, actually, I really like that answer for a couple of reasons. One, you broke it down to the relative. So remember, almost nothing is absolute. Even when we speak, we shouldn't speak in absolutes. And you'll hear me commonly say, well, this is how the NSCA sees it, or this is the way, this is a way, not the way, or this is how Westside Barbell programs it, or this is how Eric Cressy performs it. It's never like, this is how it needs to be done. So there should always be a relative component to that. So I really like that answer on that. Also, I really like the fact that you said at least be able to squat your body weight plus. So obviously it's your body weight plus your actual body weight before performing depth jumps, which depth jumps are probably the top tier progression, unless you were a psychopath and wanted to do weighted drop jumps or weighted depth jumps.
Yeah, they're hard.
They're hard, and you have to be some kind of athlete with years of experience under your belt before you should really even perform those. But the fact that you put that metric on the hardest progression. I absolutely agree with. I would probably argue for maybe a little bit more than body weight for that specific protocol. But then again, how many kids are jumping off of a jungle gym, landing on the ground, and then running off, and they're probably not performing a squat with 1.5 times their body weight, So it's absolutely relative. It's depends on their training history, depends on their injury history, depends on their body weight. It depends on, I guess, what they've been exposed to as well. So really good answer. Anyone else want to continue that or counter it or agree with it? No? All right. Great job with that answer, Nick. So I have a YouTube pulled up. I have not pre-screened this video, but I just want to go through here. You should be able to see my screen. It's aggressively loud in my headphones. I don't know if you can hear it well. I don't want to see an approach him. Okay, good. So that's actually all I need right there. All right, so before starting, let's slow this down. Playback speed. I have to go even slower. He sped this up. Okay, so here we are in the eccentric phase. Amortization phase happens very fast. We'll touch on that in a little bit. And then the concentric phase. So we think of it like this. We are creating potential energy, storing it, releasing it, and energy from our voluntary muscle contraction. That's really all I need from that video. Does that make sense? I know wasn't a great video, but it did its purpose.
Professor, I have a thought to share.
Sure, let's hear it.
So for kids, I'm like thinking, because I used to volunteer with a gym teacher, and seeing how they play, let's say in recess or even during gym class, they do a lot of sprinting, which would kind of make them a little bit stronger to be able to do plyometric jumps. I think it's just that their coordination is what stops them, because they think about, oh, okay, let me run across the field and not let me see how high I could jump.
Right.
And then going off of what Nick said, going off of a patient or a client who just came back from an injury, you need like a slow progression and not jumping into like a 2-foot high jump, more like 6 inches and then a foot and then like slowly progress them.
Yeah, for sure. And we can get super creative with our plyometric training too. Like, unfortunately, very commonly, and we're guilty of it as teaching staff, but we automatically default to box jumps, Olympic lifts, power cleaning and power snatching, jerking, clean and jerk, etc. But there are so much more involved. And I believe it was actually you that was talking about the ballistic high knees. That's absolutely a plyometric exercise. Even we call them ankle pops or toe pops. I don't know if there's a technical term for them, but where basically you keep your knees stiff and you pop off of your toes up and down repeatedly for either time or 25 reps or so, or whatever it is. That in itself is a form of plyometric exercise because you're producing maximal force, high levels of force in a very quick period, and you're absorbing it, stretching. There's the eccentric, there's the amortization in the concentric phase. Amortization and concentric phase of the exercise, and then you're creating both kinetic energy from the stretch as well as voluntary muscle contraction as well. So it checks all the blocks. So basically, in short, we could be better at being descriptive, as Nick was, with what plyometric exercise is, what is the entry point, and where we should be milestone-wise before entering the more difficult variations. So I did see that I had another question here in the chats. Let's pull that up. Okay, so Christian says needs to be some sort of baseline strength before doing plyometrics. For example, you wouldn't want someone who can't do more than 5 normal push-ups to do plyometric push-up, as they would most likely lead to injury of the person, may not even have the strength to even poorly attempt exercise. Again, absolutely agree. And the upper body is a little bit of a different beast. And I'm going to put some personal bias when we get to upper body plyometric exercises. I'm going to put some personal bias out into the atmosphere, which I try not to do commonly, but with this one, I don't like the plyometric push-up at all. There are certainly upper body variations, and I'll discuss those as well, that are safe and way more effective.
Your plyo
All
push-ups
right.
are rough on the shoulders. That's a lot of that's a lot of force coming down, especially if your shoulder placement is a little bit too forward. That's all front delt, and there's no chest involvement. Very little.
Right.
So rough.
Furthermore, from 15 years in the military and over a year of teaching and 6 years as a strength and conditioning coach, I could probably estimate the amount of people that do correct push-ups without any coaching to be under 150. When we're talking about thousands of people assessed, and it's not common. And what I consider a proper push-up is a safe push-up, biomechanically speaking, and that means elbows rotated in, actual engagement of the lats, hands outside of the shoulders, slightly outside the shoulders, or just under. The elbow flare, and I challenge all of you guys, if you want to do it as a fun homework assignment, when you can see people again, or if you are seeing people, pick 10 random people and just say, hey, look, I'm doing an experiment for school. I just want to see one push-up. The amount of elbow flare, I'm guessing, will be in the 8 out of 10 percentile, 80 percentile. I'm willing to bet you. It's crazy. But like you said,
right, I'm going to try that.
Try it. I welcome you. I challenge you.
I'll try that.
What I typically see, and man, even in the military, we had non-commissioned officers, or senior non-commissioned officers, which I am now. But as a junior soldier, you just listen to the people above you. That's just what you do. But we'd have our all of our NCOs tell us to go wide on our push-ups, on our push-up test. That way it gives you fresh muscle. So if you're doing push-ups one way and you burn out, go a little bit wider and you get fresh muscle. Go a bit narrower and you get fresh muscle. There is some truth to that for sure, because out here you're taking triceps out. So if your triceps are smoked, going out here will take some of the effort off your triceps. You know what else will do? Put a significant more amount of strain on the shoulder, a lot of torque on the shoulder. Biomechanically, we need to have the movement perfected. And then we can worry about the conditioning of the muscle. And here we get into sport specificity, or the SAID principle, specific adaptations to impose demands. If I'm a stupid grunt and I need to do 90 push-ups in 2 minutes, then I start with biomechanical efficiency. What is the least amount of unnecessary torque, wasted effort in the movement? Or what is the most improved economy of effort? We start there. Fix the effort, condition the muscle. If I can only do 50, where is it? Where is the weakness? Is the weakness in the conditioning of the muscle, or is the weakness in my absolute strength? Because if I can bench 500 pounds, I can probably bench 135 pounds way more times than someone who can bench 185 pounds as one rep max. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that.
Okay, endurance. In other words, endurance is a byproduct of strength, but not the other way around. If you can bench 135 for 50, that does not mean you can bench 500 pounds. Yep. So with that being said, if I fix my economy of effort, I'm safe, and I'm wasting less energy performing the movement poorly. There, I condition either strength or conditioning. So if I only get to 25 push-ups, but I continuously try for over 90 seconds, then it's absolute strength that I'm lacking. If I blow through 62 push-ups in 30 seconds and then just die, then my conditioning is the weakness. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes sense.
All
That's
right. So
interesting.
so if I'm trying to train that soldier, if I'm trying to, hey, dummy, come here. I don't tell him to go wider and get new muscle, get fresh muscle. I tell him that he either needs to get stronger or set a timer. So what I do I work primarily with tactical athletes and those that desire to be tactical athletes. So I'll take them and I'll put them through their whatever test they'll have to go to for training, whether they're training up for special operations, which I've had a couple go through Air Force, Army, and Marine special operations, which has been pretty cool, and a couple really cool NYPD positions. So as they get ready for their tests to get into those positions, I have to see where their weaknesses are. So we do the assessment, the needs analysis, and I watch them. So, you say, hey, dumb grunt, come here. You died in the first 25 seconds of your test, but you hit 52 push-ups or 62 push-ups. You need to set a timer for 60 seconds and just work. Doesn't matter if you do 5 or 50 push-ups in 60 seconds. You need to work for 60 seconds. Then take 60 seconds off and do it again and do it again. 3 to 4 times twice a week, and their conditioning of the muscle will improve dramatically. If they continuously work for 2 minutes and they don't get past 30, then we need to put them on a strength program quickly. Almost everyone will improve with better strength. Almost. There is a point of diminished returns in elite athletes. A 500-pound squatter will most likely not get any faster if he can squat 550 or 600, where he will probably get faster if his economy of effort is fixed. Whereas a 185-pound squatter will probably get a lot faster if he can get to 300 pounds squatting.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
All right.
Wow.
Some knowledge today.
That's really cool. Thank you.
No problem. This is very clearly a passion for me. All right. So the purpose of lower body plyometric exercises are to develop muscular power of the lower body, improving jumping and bounding. Common flaws are improper landing, perform too fast, not using full range of motion, and the series elastic component, meaning they're not using it, perform too soon and too often. Cues would be proper depth. Make sure we get triple extension. Triple extension is the full extension of the hips, knees, and ankles. If you watch someone jump in slow motion, commonly we are not extending at either the ankles or the hips fully, or we're not extending synchronistically. We're not finishing that extension altogether. We're either finishing one or the other out of order. There was one other thing I wanted to touch on. Oh, so when it comes to box jumps and other plyometric exercises, I often will coach the landing before actually coaching the jump itself, because if they can land safely, the risk of injury is a little bit lower, I feel. So that is an opinion. I'm sure we could quantify it or argue it via research. But what I have found that if you take a young kid, or especially frequent in female athletes, when they jump or land, their knees bow in. And that is due to a few things. One of them is they are typically more flexible, so they have a little bit more elasticity in the ligaments and tendons, and that is unnecessary torque. So if we look at my hands as kneecaps and the knees bow in, right, we're putting a lot of strain on where the femur would come down and the tibia comes up. That's unnecessary torque because the bones aren't stacked. So if the bones aren't stacked, then it's torque. So the pressure is coming to the side as opposed to compressive. So remember, go back to the low bar squat. We have compressive torque and we have shear torque. Shear torque is what does a lot of damage to the ligaments, the tendons, the ACL, the MCL, LCL, etc. So I like to teach the landing before I teach the takeoff.
Would that I have a patient that does that, and that makes sense now because both of the females are ACLs. and we started jumping with them a couple weeks ago, and their knees bow in and their feet kind of kick out. So
Yeah.
would that kind of be to fix that? Would it be strengthening the hips a little bit and the adductors and stuff, or what?
Hips are a big one. Also, the adductors, the internal musculature of the leg. This
Yeah.
is really common in most of our society, and it's why a lot of our youth are beginning to struggle with knee pain or arthritic-like symptoms early on. And again, I'm speaking purely observative. I cannot diagnose, and I have no image to back this up, but it is something I've personally experienced and have helped a lot of people with as well. When most of our activities develop the outside of the quads, the vastus lateralis, as opposed to the intermedius or medialis. So when the lateralis gets so strong, all of the quad tendons come down and attach into the kneecap. So if the outside becomes this big, strong rock of muscle, and the inside is this very underdeveloped muscle, and you can, again, do a case study, look around 10 of your friends, tell them to hike their shorts up to mid thigh and look at their VMO. People argue if the VMO is real muscle, but that little fist-like muscle on the inside of the knee, see if it's underdeveloped or developed. Typically, you'll see soccer players have a very defined, very developed VMO, whereas a lot of other people do not. So what happens is the lateral muscle pulls the kneecap to the outside, and that knee, which should be in a tract, is now causing friction on the outside, and that causes that arthritic-like pain.
Wow. All right, cool.
Yes, we should
So-
be open.
Yeah, so two things we could do to help fix the knees buckling and the toes kicking out would be strengthening of the hips and the adductors. If you have access to a hip abductor machine, that's great. If not, you can use med ball crushes, where you place a med ball between the knees, have them squeeze real tight for a few seconds, and then release, and you'll feel the adductor engage. Well, they'll feel the adductor engage and then release.
All right, cool.
All right.
Thank you.
So no problem. So now we're going to go into the upper body, and then we're going to finish up with the core. And core plyometric training is even more off-putting than upper body plyometric training. But we have medicine ball throws with no catch. So that's just taking a non bouncy med ball. You have to be very careful when telling clients to grab a med ball. Make sure they grab one that's sand based and does not bounce versus one that does bounce. And then you can have them perform chest passes into the wall, or you can have them lie supine on the ground, which is on their back, and take the med ball on their chest, elbows in, and then launch it up to the sky, towards the sky, obviously, and no catch. So that would mean someone standing over them ready to catch that med ball, or they roll out of the way. If you do that one on the ground, it's quicker to have someone standing over you that can catch the med ball and then hand it back to the client, unless you're just doing one. But typically they're done in sets of 1 to 5. And then from there, we have med ball throws with a catch. So this would be, let's use the same progression of lying supine on the ground. Now, instead of having someone standing over us, catching it, and then releasing it back to us, now we're going to throw it up in the air, catch it, absorb it towards the chest a little bit, and then fire back as quickly as possible. So this is where we're looking at what would be considered ground contact time on a lower body plyometric exercise, where the amount of time the foot is in contact with the ground. This is our palm contact times. So this is the ball contact time. So this is the amount of time the ball is in contact with our palm. We want that to be as short as possible. In other words, we want the amortization phase as short as possible. And then we have arms elevated plyo push-up. So this one I'm actually pretty okay with. This is where we elevate a barbell into a squat rack or other higher surface, the arm of a couch, something like that. Get into a good push-up position and then fire up hard. So this is elevating us. It's taking a significant amount of our body weight off of the exercise, which, remember, force and velocity can't exist at great measures in the same vector. So this allows us to reduce the amount of force needed, and it can increase our velocity. And then plyo push-ups, I'm not a big fan of, as we discussed, for numerous reasons, and safety of the shoulder and correct positioning being the two main ones. Purpose: to develop muscular power of the upper body. Improving explosive pushing. Common flaws: improper landing, perform too fast, not using full range of motion, or serious elastic component, perform too soon and not too often. Cues: proper depth. Rigid core often goes overlooked. We see a lot of people doing just regular push-ups, even where their hips don't move, their upper body just moves. And then you want to make sure that we intake air, squeeze tight, make sure our hips are out of anterior pelvic tilt and are neutralized, and then perform all plyometric exercises, especially upper body exercises from that position. Explode, and then land softly. I like using the coaching cue to land softly, but what that is telling us to do is absorb the impact. So we're not landing with rigid joints. In most cases, we're absorbing it and allowing the tendon stiffness to increase over time. Land softly, or if it's a box jump, I'll tell our junior athletes to land as quietly as they can because they enjoy that kind of challenge, and it's something that they receive immediate feedback on. So we'll tell them to try to land like a ninja or something like that. Again, it's all the coaching cues is an art and meeting your clients where they are. Trunk. I don't agree with it at all. And let me rephrase that. I don't agree with linear plyometric core trunk work at all. Medicine ball slams, that is an okay one. Medicine ball sit-up throws with no catch or with catch, I'm not a big fan of those at all. Medicine ball twist throws, I don't like so much the twist where we sit down on the ground and do it. I prefer to be standing up, and then we'll synchronize the outside glute. So if I'm facing with my left shoulder to the wall, the right glute and the transverse abdominis from the left rib cage down to the right pelvis is going to perform the work. I do like that one a decent amount, especially for wrestlers and things of that nature. Remember the SAID principle and the sport specificity. Purpose is to develop muscular power of the trunk, improving rotational power and stability. Common flaws: perform too fast, not using full range of motion, and serious elastic component, perform too soon and too often. Using arms over the core. Using arms over the core is a big one, especially for aging athletes or athletes with a decent amount of exercise history, because they'll typically have some form of tendinopathy, call it golfer's elbow, tennis elbow, tendonitis, or tendinosis, whatever you want to call it. They can irritate their tendons pretty easily, and I almost get immediate feedback when I'm performing these poorly, because I'll start to feel it in my tendons of the bicep and the brachioradialis over the core. There's one main common flaw missing here, and that is doing it with a soft core. So if you're performing this exercise with a soft core, you got to think about what's happening to the spine. The reason we use the Valsalva maneuver, which I think that we should be using the Valsalva maneuver for this, especially rotational, is we are creating that fluid ball inside the stomach, or the airbag for the spine, so we don't have any unnecessary rotation or flexion or unwanted rotation or flexion of the vertebrae. Yes, we are rotating the trunk. This does not mean we want to rotate the vertebrae specifically. Proper cues: full range of motion or proper range of motion, focus on the core, and explode. No need to review our homework, some references for research. I'll take any questions we have now, and then we'll take the quiz. I know we did it in reverse order today. It's okay.
Professor, wouldn't children's bones being more flexible also mean that they're less likely to experience any type of bone or joint injury when doing plyometrics than an adult would?
I would say more flexibility is a greater likelihood after youth. So once you're no longer a youth athlete, I would say that greater flexibility is a increased chance of injury. And there's a little bit of room on either side of the argument to even say with younger athletes that it is more of a risk. But I stand with youth athletes are okay to do body weight plyometric exercise in a very controlled environment. But over flexibility, you have to think about hyperextensions, torn ACLs, and things of that nature. They typically happen in change of direction drills and speed drills, agility drills, and fields of play where, you're basically doing change of direction and agility for the entire play.
Yeah, I was thinking that they probably experienced more ligament and tendon injuries because of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely, I agree. I think it's I thought you were saying the counter side to that you were saying it was
No,
decreaser. Yeah.
no, I meant like I felt like that their bones were a little bit more difficult to experience breaks, but I know that because of the increased flexibility, it means that the tendon and ligament is going to be stretched more.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would agree with that, again, with taking the youth out of that, because youth, not so much the hard bone, but the growth plates are what is at risk in them. Females do naturally have less dense bones. And I'm not sure from a physics standpoint, and I'm not a physics major, but from a physics standpoint, it does kind of make sense that if the bone is obviously more dense tissue than ligaments, so the ligaments are going to take the brunt of the load. I don't know. I definitely think that the two main factors for females being at an increased risk of injury in plyometric training is hyper lax joints and reduced muscle mass or tendon stiffness. So the one and three are the same, lack of tendon stiffness and overly lax joints, ligaments. And I think a lack of musculature is also the cause of that. And again, that's from a biological standpoint.
Cool. I was just more or less curious.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the quiz for today. And we still have one more quiz that we didn't take. I'm going to just open that for you guys to take on your own. I believe it was the overhead lecture we never took a quiz on, but we'll take the quiz for today, right here, right now. And then I'll just open the overhead quiz, and you can do that as homework. If you've already done it, that's fine. No big deal.
The quiz is already open for me.
Interesting. I probably never shut it. So if you actually don't take it just yet, because I'm building the parameters now.
Oh, mine was open. So will it shut me out or?
I'm not sure. If it does, I'll just reopen it for you. It's no big deal.
All right, cool.
Again, these aren't like got you quizzes. These are to make sure we are learning what we're supposed to learn, and I'm doing a decent enough job of teaching you what you need to learn. If you if all of you guys fail your exams and quizzes, it's not you guys, it's obviously me. So this is my feedback mechanism to make sure we are getting it done. Okay, quiz should be opening. It's going to lock out at 10:45. No need to stay on Zoom. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'm going to jump on another class. Thanks for the participation today. I really enjoy the conversational aspect of it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask now.
No, thanks, Professor.
Thank you, guys. All right, enjoy your day and weekend, and I will see you next week.
All righty, later.
Bye.
Bye.